The tea had gone cold, but I still held the cup in both hands. The morning sun hit the wood floor in strips just like it used to when David was a boy, back when his feet were small enough to leave damp prints from the garden. Now the floor was polished. Quiet. Too quiet. I heard their voices in the kitchen. Shelby's light laugh, the clink of dishes. Then David said it. Not loud. Not cruel. But clear. She's just extra. We didn't plan around her. She just helps where she can. The words landed in my chest like a pebble in a still pond. Extra. Not mother. Not co-owner. Not the woman who signed the loan when the bank said no. Just extra. I didn't say anything. Just looked around my little corner by the window. The same corner I'd chosen when I moved in after Harold passed. I didn't ask for the master bedroom. Didn't ask for my name on the mailbox. Didn't ask for my photo back on the mantle. I just kept the linens folded, the coffee hot, and the fridge stocked with juice boxes for the twins. I thought that would be enough. That quiet support meant belonging. But extra means optional. And optional means forgotten. I set the cup down. Stood up slowly. My knees popped, reminding me that silence has a cost. The floor creaked beneath me. Same board I stepped on the day we moved in, when David and Shelby still called it our dream home. They forgot whose dream came first. I walked past the kitchen. Neither of them looked up. Shelby was wiping the counter like she owned the wood. David was scrolling as if the woman who raised him had become part of the furniture. Maybe I am just extra. But I know this house like I know my own heartbeat. And I remember what name is on the title next to his. Not hers. Not yet. Would you remember who built the ground you're standing on? Or would you forget? The second it stopped asking to be seen. The bank papers still smelled like ink even after all these years. I keep them in a fireproof box tucked beneath a wool blanket in the hallway closet. It's silly, maybe. But that signature mine was the only reason David and Shelby got this house. They were newly married then. David had just been laid off from the mill. Shelby was 6 months pregnant, still trying to finish her courses at the community college. They cried at my kitchen table. Not out of shame, but exhaustion. "Mama, we found a place," David said. "It needs some work, but the bones are good. We just need help with the loan." I didn't even ask the price. Didn't blink. I emptied my savings, dipped into Harold's pension, and signed my name beside theirs. Because that's what mothers do. We build. We buffer. We believe. The day they got the keys, David cried in the driveway. Shelby kissed my cheek and said, "You've given us a real start, Marian." I didn't want control. I wanted them safe. And this house, this creaky old place with the chipped porch and the oak out front, felt like safety. I stayed in my rental for a while. Let them have space. But then Harold passed. 39 years of marriage gone in a single breath at St. Luke's Hospital. The house felt too quiet. Too empty. So when David offered, "Why don't you just move in, Ma? We've got the space," I accepted. I brought just a few things: my rocking chair, the quilt from our wedding, and Harold's Bible with the spine nearly split in two. I asked for the room near the kitchen. Not the master. Not the upstairs. Just somewhere with light in the morning and a wall strong enough to lean a shelf of cookbooks. They agreed. Smiled. Said of course. And for a while it felt like home. I made the coffee every morning. Folded towels into perfect squares. Snuck chocolate into the twins' lunchboxes. It wasn't big. But it was something. A presence. A rhythm. Until little things started shifting, and suddenly, I wasn't so sure I was meant to stay. It started with the towels. The ones I folded disappeared from the linen closet. Replaced with a matching beige set still stiff from the store. Then my tea canister vanished. The one with the floral lid and the dent on the side. I found it weeks later in the garage next to a box labeled seasonal junk. I didn't ask. Didn't want the answer. Instead, I brewed new tea in a stainless steel pot and said nothing when Shelby brought home a Keurig. "They're on sale," she said. "Faster, less mess." She smiled like it was a gift. Like convenience was kindness. David nodded along. He always did. One evening, I came back from picking up the twins. My bookshelf was gone. The little one Harold built me. 3 rows smooth wood hand-stained the week after our first anniversary. They said it was too clunky for the hallway. Shelby wanted cleaner lines. The books were stacked on the floor of my room. Cookbooks. Novels I'd taught from. A poetry collection with a pressed rose still inside. No one mentioned it. No one thought they had to. I dusted them off and slid them under the bed. That night I couldn't sleep. The light from Shelby's hallway lamp spilled into my doorway. She had replaced the yellow bulb with a white one, brighter, she said. But it made the house feel like a waiting room. Cold. I missed the old light. The soft gold glow that warmed the floorboards and softened David's face when he used to sit at the kitchen table doing homework. Back then, he'd ask me to quiz him on spelling words. Now he barely looked up from his phone when I asked if he wanted pie. Shelby said they were cutting back on sugar. But there were frosted cupcakes in the fridge with names written in blue. Not Mina. I began to feel like a ghost. Not unwelcome, just unnoticed. I told myself it was the natural order. Children grow, build families, reshape their homes. But deep inside a quiet ache began to settle. Not from being replaced but from being erased. One Sunday morning I woke up to the sound of hammering. I stepped out of my room still in my robe and found Shelby standing on a step stool in the front hallway. She was hanging a new canvas print, a family photo taken last fall. Her David, the twins. All smiles, matching flannel. I wasn't in it. The frame bumped the wall awkwardly, replacing the old wedding portrait of Harold and me. I looked for that portrait later. Found it leaning behind a shoe rack in the hall closet, partially covered by a raincoat. The glass had cracked down the middle. I ran my fingers along the split. My dress. Harold's tie. Our smiles. All broken into halves. I brought it back to my room. Set it on the dresser next to the Bible. Didn't say a word. That afternoon, David and Shelby hosted a barbecue. Neighbors came, friends from work, a few parents from the kids' school. I stayed inside. Not out of protest. But because I hadn't been asked. I watched from the window, people laughing in lawn chairs, drinks clinking, kids running through the sprinkler. No one asked where Grandma Marian was. No one missed her banana pudding. Later that night, as I gathered paper plates from the yard, I overheard Shelby telling a guest. "It's just us here. We're finally making the space our own." She said it so easily. Like I was part of the furniture being phased out. Like I wasn't still paying the property taxes every January. I sat on the back steps listening to the cicadas rise with the dusk. The sky turned lavender. My knees ached. And for the first time I wondered if this house even remembered who steadied its beams when the wind came hard in '98. I used to think that staying quiet was grace. That not needing thanks made me stronger. But maybe silence just taught them how to forget. Maybe the ground doesn't shake when you erase its name. Maybe it only waits until the walls start to crack. And by then, who will remember who held them up? The dining table had new chairs. Gray metal-legged, smooth. They didn't creak when you sat. Didn't match the oak grain of the table. Didn't match anything really. My old ones, the spindle-backed chairs Harold refinished one summer, were gone. I found them in the garage stacked under holiday boxes. Still solid. Still warm from memory. No one said why. That evening, Shelby mentioned, "We're going for a more modern feel. Clean lines. Open space." I nodded. But in my chest something shifted. They weren't just replacing chairs. They were rewriting the room. The next week, I noticed my apron was missing. The one with the embroidered violets faded around the seams. I had worn it every Sunday morning since the twins were born. I found it in a donation pile near the laundry room. No note. No mistake. I stood there holding it in both hands. Soft cotton. Stitching done by Mama in '78. Shelby walked by and said, "Oh, I didn't think anyone used that old thing." She smiled. Kept walking. I folded the apron neatly. Took it back to my room. The next morning, they rearranged the living room. My rocking chair was gone. Replaced by a velvet ottoman with a fake plant on top. The chair wasn't even old. Just familiar. It had a rhythm. A place for elbows and stories. David said, "We're streamlining, Ma. The kids keep tripping on it." But no one tripped when they curled up on my lap in it. When I read Charlotte's Web, with voices for every character. That chair had held every fever, every bedtime prayer, every scraped knee. Now it was in the attic. Wrapped in a tarp. I asked once if I could bring it back down. Shelby hesitated. David rubbed his neck. "We just don't have space. Ma. You understand, right?" I smiled. But something inside me wasn't smiling anymore. Family night used to mean pot roast. Carrots soft. Gravy rich. The twins setting the table with crooked forks and too many napkins. We'd play dominoes after dinner. David always won. Shelby would pretend to be upset and the kids would team up against us. Laughter. Real messy overlapping laughter. Then one Friday, I wasn't invited. I found out by accident. Came home from the library, arms full of picture books for the twins, and saw through the window the table set. Candles lit. My seat. Gone. Replaced by a high chair for a neighbor's toddler. A friend from Shelby's yoga group. I stood at the door for a moment debating whether to knock. Whether I should act surprised or pretend I'd been told. David opened it before I could decide. "Oh, Ma. You're back early. I live here," I said. He chuckled. "Not cruel, just uncomfortable. We thought you were with your book club tonight." Book club had been cancelled. Rainstorm. Power out at June's place. He scratched his head. Shelby appeared behind him holding a serving tray. "There's a lot of folks tonight," she said. "I hope you don't mind, we sort of filled the space." I smiled thinly. Held up the library bag. "Just dropping these off for the kids." Shelby took the bag but didn't invite me in. The door stayed half open. Like I was a neighbor, not family. I stood there for another second, then turned away. As I walked down the porch, I heard her laugh behind me. Light. Easy. The same laugh from the kitchen that morning. When I got to my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the stack of borrowed books still in my arms. I'd held on to them without noticing. One slipped from my grasp. The Giving Tree. Asterisk. It landed face up. The page opened to the stump. I stared at it for a long time. The next week, the twins had a school concert. I ironed their shirts the night before. Laid out hair clips. Set out the camera, the good one Harold gave me for our 30th anniversary. I asked David what time to be ready. He hesitated. Rubbed the back of his neck again. "Actually, Ma. There's limited seating. And Shelby's parents are coming in from Branson. You know how those school gyms get." He blinked. "You mean? I'm not going." He looked pained. "We'll record it. I promise. Front row, you'll see everything." I nodded slowly. But my hands curled in my lap. After they left, the house echoed. Empty coffee mugs on the counter. A ribbon left behind on the hallway floor. The faint smell of shampoo still hanging in the twins' bathroom. I stood in the doorway of their room and tried to remember the last time they asked me for a bedtime story. It had been weeks. Maybe more. I sat in my chair, the one they'd said took up too much space, and watched the clock. When the footage finally came through, it was shaky. Someone's head blocked half the view. And the sound cracked whenever the crowd clapped. Still, I watched it twice. Then 3 times. Not because of the performance, but to catch a glimpse of flicker of their little faces under the stage lights. At the end, when the kids ran to hug their parents, Shelby bent down with her phone out. David lifted the twins up, one in each arm. Laughed so big his face disappeared in a blur. I wasn't in the video. I wasn't in the crowd. I was in the house that paid for those costumes, those shoes, that tuition. Sitting in silence with the remote in one hand and Harold's camera in the other. I turned it off. Placed the camera gently back in its case. And that night, for the first time, I locked my door. Not because I feared anything, but because I finally understood. They weren't pushing me out, they were simply living as if I'd already gone. And the worst part was it was working. Would you notice if someone faded from your life without making a sound? I never liked opening the mail. Too many catalogs. Too many donation requests from places I never signed up for. But that day, something caught my eye. A letter from First Horizon Bank. Addressed to David. But the envelope was thin, just a single sheet inside, and it slid open too easily. I shouldn't have looked. But something told me to. The page said * reminder confirm, updated primary account holders for mortgage refiling. *. Updated. Primary. Refiling. I read the words again. Then again. My name wasn't listed anywhere. Not even in the fine print. Just David Foster and Shelby Marie Foster. No. Marian. No co-owner. No trace of the woman who'd signed the original papers with trembling hands and a prayer tucked in her pocket. I folded the letter with deliberate care, as if neatness could protect me from what it meant. That night at dinner, I asked David softly, "What's this about the mortgage?" He froze. Mid-bite. Shelby didn't. She wiped her mouth, set her napkin down and said, "Oh, we're just trying to streamline things. The bank suggested we simplify the title." Simplify. Was there something wrong with the way it is, I asked. Shelby smiled. Not wrong, just outdated. David didn't meet my eyes. I looked down at the table. Noticed they'd changed the placemats again. New ones. Geometric patterns. No more lace trim. I swallowed hard. I still have equity in this house. Shelby nodded politely. Of course. We're just trying to get everything consistent before we refinance. No big deal. But it was a big deal. Because consistent meant removing the last trace of my handwriting from the walls that I helped raise. After dinner, I sat alone on the porch swing. The air smelled like warm mulch and distant rain. I closed my eyes and remembered signing those papers at the kitchen table with Harold's old pen. He told me, "Mari, this is the kind of thing they'll never thank you for. So you'd better do it because it matters to you." It mattered. And it still does. Even if they wish I'd forget. That night I pulled out the fireproof box. The one with Harold's handwriting on the lid, house papers. Keep safe. The latch still stuck a little. Had to press down hard with my thumb to get it to click open. Inside, everything was where it had always been. Folded carefully. Rubber bands brittle from age. I lifted out the original deed. Yellowed but clear. Marian E. Foster. David A. Foster. Co-owners. Equal signers. I traced my name like a woman reading her own tombstone. Not erased yet. But close. The bank's letter felt colder now. Like the first shiver before a storm hits. I flipped through the rest, loan statements, insurance paperwork, even the old receipt from when we paid off the final kitchen renovation. I remembered the tile. White with soft green swirls. Picked it because it reminded me of the rolling hills near my grandmother's farm. Shelby had covered it last year with peel and stick gray squares. She called it modernizing. I called it erasing. The next day, I asked David if he remembered why we put my name on the deed in the first place. He blinked, then shrugged. I mean, you helped, sure. But the house is ours now. You live here. What difference does it make? What difference? He said it like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. I nodded, but inside my chest went still. Like the quiet that comes just before the lights go out. Later that evening, I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at the manila folder still in my hands. Harold's signature. My own, looped and careful. We had bet everything on this place. Backed our retirement on their future. And now they were trying to edit me out like a footnote in someone else's chapter. I closed the folder. Pressed it against my chest. Then I picked up the phone. Dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Clyde. The voice on the other end paused. Well, I'll be. Marian Foster. Haven't heard that name in a long while. It's time, I said. Soft. But steady. I need you to help me remember what's still mine. Clyde met me at the old cafe on Walnut Street. Same place we signed the loan papers 23 years ago. He walked slower now. Hair grayer. But his eyes still sharp. We sat by the window. Ordered coffee. I brought the folder. He didn't need long to read it. Didn't even need his glasses. After a while, he set the paper down and said, Well, they haven't taken you off anything. Not legally. I exhaled. Didn't even realize I'd been holding my breath. You still hold full rights. Half the equity. No sale, refinance, or transfer can happen without your consent. I nodded. Fingers wrapped tight around my mug. But if they're planning something, he said, you should be prepared. I looked out the window. The trees on Walnut were blooming again. Late spring, soft pinks and slow wind. Can I sell my half? I asked. Clyde raised an eyebrow. You can. To anyone who'll buy it. Including nonprofits. Churches. Community foundations. I didn't smile. But something inside me sat up straighter. We made a plan. Quiet. Clean. No courtroom. No confrontation. Just paperwork. The kind of power people forget you have when you stop reminding them you ever did. That night I baked cornbread. Set the table for 3. David was late. Shelby too busy texting. When we finally sat down, I poured the sweet tea, cut each slice just so. Shelby bit in and said, This is good, Marian. I nodded. Glad you think so. David smiled like nothing had changed. And maybe for him nothing had, but in my purse tucked between a peppermint and an ink pen was a signed letter of intent. And in my pocket a small business card. Clyde's name on one side. The name of a community land trust on the other. They were looking for space, a corner lot with good access and deep roots. I hadn't said yes. Not yet. But the option sat in my hands like a quiet door no one saw me open. And that night, as the house settled around me, wood creaking pipes, whispering air thick with summer heat, I whispered back. I'm still here. And I haven't forgotten who poured the concrete under these walls. The rain came without warning. Soft at first. Then harder, drumming against the kitchen windows like a memory trying to get back in. I stood at the sink watching water gather along the garden bricks. The twins were supposed to help me plant tomatoes. We'd picked the seeds together. Labeled the packets with stickers. But they never showed. Shelby said they had a playdate. Said she forgot to text. I smiled, told her it was fine. Told her I'd just do it myself. So I did. In the drizzle. Knees damp. Hands deep in Missouri soil. The same soil I used to kneel on when David scraped his elbows falling off his bike. The garden bed was smaller now. Shelby said less clutter. David said less upkeep. But I still knew where the sun hit best. where basil liked to curl and where tomatoes blushed earliest. I stayed out there until my back ached. Came in with dirt under my nails and a wet hem clinging to my ankles. That's when I saw it. A brochure on the hallway table. Glossy. Sharp-edged. Asterisk. Your next chapter, Golden Meadow Senior Living. Asterisk. Someone had circled the phone number in ink. David's handwriting. I knew the loop in his 6. I taught him how to write it. I picked it up slowly as if it might cut me. Golden Meadow. They had pamphlets at the clinic. Flat carpets. Soft food. No kitchens. Just community spaces. No gardens. No basements. No back steps for planting tomatoes with children who forget to come. I stood there for a long time. The twins came home later dragging their backpacks, faces flushed from playing. One of them, Clara, ran up to me and hugged my leg. Her cheeks were warm. Her hair still damp. She looked up and asked Grandma, "Were you ever the boss of this house?" I froze. Boss. That word felt foreign in my mouth now. I looked at her the same eyes David had at 5. And I didn't know how to answer. Because yes, once. But now. Even the soil I touched felt borrowed. I tucked a wet strand behind Clara's ear. Kissed her forehead. "You think I wasn't?" I asked. Half teasing. She shrugged. "I don't know. You don't talk loud like Mommy. And your name's not on the door." I laughed softly. But something in my chest went very, very still. Later that night, after they'd gone to bed, I stood in front of the hall closet. Opened it, looked inside. My apron was gone again. The quilt I'd folded last winter missing. And on the top shelf, just barely visible, was a stack of picture frames. One of them held a photo of Harold and me on the day we closed on this house. It was upside down, behind a box labeled extra linens. I pulled the photo frame down with both hands. The dust clung to my skin. The glass was cool, and the corner had chipped just a little. But the picture, it was whole. Harold's arm around me, his tie crooked. My hair curled too tightly that day. I had laughed when I saw the proof. We were standing on the porch, keys in one hand, deed in the other. That was the day we gave David the upstairs room. The one with the slanted ceiling and the window that caught the western sun. He was 9. He said it made him feel tall. I remember Harold's hand resting on my back as we watched David run up the steps. We were tired, but proud. That house wasn't big, but it was ours. And we believed we were building something that would hold not just furniture, but family. I sat down on the edge of the bed and held the photo in my lap. I remembered the night Harold signed the loan papers. His pen ran out halfway through. He had to borrow one from Clyde. We joked it was a sign that nothing worth building ever came easy. Now I looked around the room. My room. It was tidy. Quiet. But not mine. None of the furniture matched. None of the shelves held my books. The only space that still felt familiar was the closet, and even that had been rearranged. I stood up, opened the dresser, pulled out a box of receipts and statements I hadn't touched in years. At the very bottom, beneath folded utility bills and a faded sympathy card from Harold's funeral, was a single sheet of lined paper. David's handwriting. From when he was 12. Asterisk. Thank you for the house, Mama. Asterisk. Asterisk. When I'm big, I'll buy you one back. Asterisk. I pressed my palm over the words. Closed my eyes. Not in sadness. Not in anger. Just in stillness. Because there comes a point when a woman stops waiting to be remembered and starts remembering herself. That night I made a list, not of what I'd lost, but of what I still held. A name, a signature, a history woven into the beams, and a quiet, steady knowledge that this house did not stand because they asked it to. but because I did. When I turned out the light, I didn't feel erased. Not anymore. I felt like the blueprint beneath the paint. Invisible maybe, but essential. What happens when a foundation finally remembers it doesn't have to hold what no longer honors it? I started waking up earlier. Before the hallway light buzzed on. Before the coffee machine sputtered. Before Shelby began her high-heeled pacing across the laminate floor. It was the only time the house felt mine. I'd sit by the window, tea warming my palms, watching the oak tree sway its limbs, creaking like old knees. I remembered planting it with Harold. A thin sapling then barely waist-high. Now it brushed the second-story windows. Still standing. Still growing. Even after they stopped noticing it. That morning, I opened my notebook. The leather one I kept hidden between two cookbooks no one ever touched. I wrote a list. Line by line. Original deed, 2001 loan documents, property tax records, utility bills in my name, Clyde's contact, name of community trust. It felt like knitting. One loop at a time. Tight, purposeful. After breakfast, while Shelby loaded the dishwasher and David checked email, I asked casually, "Do we still have that lockbox key?" David looked up. "The silver one." "Yeah." "Why?" "I just wanted to check something for the taxes." He shrugged. "Sure, Ma. It's in the junk drawer." The junk drawer. Where they tossed stamps, expired coupons, the spare keys to a home they no longer believed I helped build. I took the key, waited until they left for work, and opened the lockbox. The sound of metal scraping metal. A hollow clink. Inside, my name. Over and over again. Folded. Stamped. Filed. Proof. I laid each paper on the dining table. Lined them up in neat rows. Not to confront. Not to threaten. Just to see it. To remind myself. I wasn't extra. I was essential. That afternoon I called Clyde. Told him I was ready. He didn't ask questions. Just said, "Come by Tuesday. Bring the originals." I hung up. Folded the documents back into their sleeves. Placed them in my tote bag next to a tin of ginger cookies and a black and white photo of the house the day we poured the foundation. Harold stood in the corner of the frame. One hand in his pocket, the other resting on the wooden stake that marked the center beam. I stared at that hand for a long time. Then I whispered, "I'm still holding it, Harold. Even if they let go." Clyde's office hadn't changed much. Same dusty blinds. Same tick-tick-tick of the old clock that ran a minute slow. He'd moved his desk closer to the window, though. Said his knees didn't like the backlight anymore. I laid out the documents. He studied them with quiet patience. "Everything's clean," he said. "You still have equal ownership. No clause removes you unless you sign it away." I nodded. "I never did." He smiled. "You didn't. And they can't act like you don't exist just because it's convenient." I looked down at my hands. Age spots. Knuckles stiff. But they still held ink. And memory. "Is it possible," I asked, "to sell my half to someone else? Someone who'll use it for good?" Clyde leaned back. "There's precedent. It's rare, but legal. Especially if the sale preserves the property's intent." He tapped his pen. "I've worked with a group before, Community Land Trust. They turn residential holdings into public benefit spaces. Education. Childcare. Food banks." I listened. Not rushing. I imagined the living room with shelves of books again. The dining table used for story circles, not spreadsheets. The upstairs room, a reading nook for children who needed quiet. And the garden. Left alone. Left wild. "I'd like to meet them," I said. Clyde nodded. "I'll arrange it. But Marian, are you sure? This means sharing your intent. Not revenge. Just repurposing." I met his eyes. This house was meant to hold family. If mine no longer sees it, maybe another will. He didn't reply. Just opened a folder and began filling out the form. Each page he passed me felt lighter. More solid. Like bricks stacking quiet and sure. When it was done, he placed the documents in a blue folder. Wrote my name on the tab in careful block letters. Next Tuesday, he said. They'll come by, walk the space with you. See if it fits their mission. I reached for the folder but paused. Clyde. What if they ask why I'm doing this? He looked at me for a long moment. Tell them you're reclaiming the blueprint. The part nobody notices but nothing stands without. I left the office with the folder pressed close. Not like a weapon. Not like a secret. But like a key. One I'd kept too quiet for far too long. They came on a Thursday. 2 women, maybe in their 30s. One wore denim and a clipboard. The other had soft eyes and paint flecks on her sleeves. They introduced themselves gently. No pressure. No rush. Just curiosity. And respect. This is a beautiful home, the one with the clipboard said. You can feel the care in the wood. I smiled. Not out of pride, but recognition. I showed them the garden first. It was overgrown, but they knelt beside the tomato beds like they were meeting something alive. This could be a perfect children's plot, the younger one said. Hands in the soil, real growth. Then we stepped into the living room. I didn't mention the new chairs. Or the rug Shelby bought from a catalog that smelled like chemicals. Instead, I pointed out the grooves in the floor where David used to drag his toy trucks. The spot on the wall where Harold leaned his cane. They listened. Really listened. And when we reached the staircase, I paused. Up there, I said, is where my son dreamed. But down here, this is where we built. We ended the walk in the kitchen. I made tea. Earl Grey. In my last 2 china cups. One kept. One perfect. They didn't mind. They cupped them carefully. This house feels held, one of them whispered. Like someone stayed even when it got heavy. I looked at her. And for a moment I saw Clara, older, wiser, with paint on her sleeves and wonder in her voice. When they left, they didn't ask for a decision. They just said, if it's time, we'll be ready to honor it. I stood in the doorway long after their car pulled away. The wind had picked up. The tree out front shivered as if remembering something too. I looked down at my hands. They smelled like tea and soil and memory. And for the first time in a long while they didn't feel tired. They felt ready. Not to take anything back, but to give it forward in a way that couldn't be erased. How do you reclaim something they told you is no longer yours? Sometimes you don't. You just plant it somewhere they can't reach. The pen didn't shake this time. It sat steady between my fingers. Just like the first time when Harold passed it to me across the kitchen table with calloused hands and hopeful eyes. But this time, there was no family gathered. No congratulations. No clinking of iced tea glasses. Just Clyde. And silence. And a line that needed my name. The document was short. A partial transfer of interest. No eviction. No drama. Just movement. The kind that makes no sound until the earth realizes something has shifted beneath it. I signed. Dated. Pressed the pen cap down with a soft snap. Clyde slid the paper into a yellow folder. It's done, he said. They'll file this Monday. Your portion will be held by the trust until the new deed is finalized. I nodded. Didn't say much. He looked at me then, more gently than usual. Do you want to tell them first? I thought about it. About Shelby in her spotless kitchen with her perfect utensils. About David, his phone always buzzing, his eyes never quite meeting mine anymore. No, I said. They'll find out soon enough. I stepped outside into the wind. It had turned cooler. The sky hung low, heavy with something unspoken. When I got home, no one was there. Shelby had left a note on the fridge, asterisk. Kids at piano. David late. Leftovers in fridge. Asterisk. I heated a bowl of soup. Ate at the small table by the back door. The one they never used. From that angle, the house looked older. Less curated. More honest. I watched the wind stir the leaves and tried to name the feeling in my chest. It wasn't pride. It wasn't anger. It was peace. Sturdy. Like the oak beam under the floorboards, not pretty, but strong. When David walked in later, I didn't say anything. Just smiled. Asked about his day. He never noticed the missing folder on the hall table. Never asked why the tea canister had returned to the shelf by the stove. Some things don't announce themselves. They simply arrive. En route. And wait. The envelope came 2 days later. Thick. White. Stamped with the seal of the county recorder's office. It arrived in the afternoon tucked between a grocery flyer and a coupon book for lawn services. I was in the kitchen when I heard the mailbox clang. Shelby brought the stack in. Rifled through absently. Then she paused. "What's this?" she asked, lifting the envelope with 2 fingers. David walked over. Took it from her. His brow furrowed. I dried my hands. Kept folding the dish towel. He opened it right there. Read the header. Asterisk partial ownership transfer. Public filing notice. Asterisk. His face changed. "Ma, what is this?" I looked at him. Let the silence stretch. Then I said, "Exactly what it says." Shelby stepped forward. "You sold your share." "To who?" "To someone who will use it," I said. "For something that matters." David's voice rose just a little. "Why didn't you talk to us first?" I turned to him. Gently. "Did you talk to me when you changed the title at the bank, when you threw away my chair, when you circled that brochure for Golden Meadow?" His mouth opened. Closed again. Shelby crossed her arms. "You live here. Don't you think this affects all of us?" I nodded. "Yes. And now you'll have to treat it that way." She looked to David for backup. He rubbed his temples. Saturday down at the dining table, like it might offer answers. I took the kettle off the stove. Poured water over the tea leaves. The scent rose. Earl Grey. Strong and steady. David ran his hand through his hair. "What does this mean legally?" I looked at him. "It means you don't get to forget that I helped build this house. Not just in memory, but on paper." He didn't speak after that. Shelby paced once. Then went upstairs. Footsteps sharp on the wooden stairs. The envelope sat open on the table. David stared at it like it might rearrange itself. Like it might undo what he never thought I'd have the courage to do. I drank my tea. Watched the steam drift. And said nothing more. Some truths don't need repeating. They just need filing. That night, they didn't speak to me. Dinner was quiet. No twins at the table. No passing of salt. Just forks clinking softly against ceramic. David chewed slowly, his eyes on the window like he expected someone to pull into the driveway and make this all go away. Shelby picked at her food. She didn't complain. Didn't praise it either. The silence tasted thicker than the stew. After the plates were cleared, David stayed behind. I was wiping the counters when he finally said, "Why didn't you just tell me how you felt?" I stopped. Turned toward him. "I did. Many times. You just didn't hear it because I didn't shout." He looked down at his hands. "Do you hate us?" That hurt. More than I expected. "No," I said. "I just stopped hoping you'd see me if I stayed quiet long enough." He stood slowly. His face unreadable. "Do you want to move out?" I shook my head. "Number." But I no longer want to disappear inside a house I helped build. He nodded, but not like he understood, more like someone trying to find a sentence inside a language they never learned. He left the kitchen. The stairs creaked under his weight. I stood there for a long time, hands still damp from the cloth, breath steady, not triumphant, not sad, just settled. Later, I walked past the twins' room. The door was ajar. I saw Clara curled in bed, one foot peeking from under the blanket. I thought about knocking, about tucking her in, asking about her day, just like I used to. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I went back to my room. Saturday at the desk. Opened the blue folder Clyde had given me. Inside was the official copy. Stamped. Filed. Undeniable. And beneath it, a handwritten letter from the director of the land trust. Asterisk. We're honored by your decision. This home carries history. We will treat it as such. Asterisk. I ran my fingers across the ink, then turned off the lamp. Let the house sit in its stillness. Not as a silence of defeat, but of reckoning. They thought the ground would never move. But even foundations can shift when they've been ignored too long. What happens next? That wasn't my burden anymore. The notice came by courier. Not regular mail. Not folded into a grocery flyer. An official envelope. Hand-delivered. I was in the kitchen watering the potted basil by the window when I heard the knock. David opened the door. I watched from the archway as he took the envelope, signed something quickly, and closed it behind him. He didn't read it right away. Just held it for a few moments, frowning like the paper was too heavy. Then he saw the seal. He sat down. Tore it open. His eyes moved across the page. Slower than usual. Then again. And again. I saw the color drain from his face like someone had turned down the dimmer in the room. Shelby walked in, coffee in hand. What is it? David didn't answer. So she reached over and took the page from him. I saw her lips move, reading silently. Then she looked at me. Not with anger. Not with pity. With confusion. Like I'd done something she didn't know I was capable of. This says we can't refinance. That there's a block on the deed. I nodded. That's correct. Because you sold your portion, David said slowly. To an outside party. I stirred the basil leaves gently. The portion I paid for. And protected. For years. Shelby's voice rose, not in volume but in pitch. So what happens now? We're just stuck. I met her eyes. Number. You're grounded. In what I built. And now so is everyone else who needs this place. David stood. His hands clenched. Then unclenched. Who are these people? What do they want from us? Nothing, I said. Just space. Just meaning. Just the part of this home that still remembers how to give. He looked like he wanted to argue, but didn't know where to begin. Instead, he walked to the back window. Stared out at the garden. I let the silence return. Not empty but earned. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. The foundation had shifted. Not broken. Not collapsed. Just reminded everyone whose hands had poured the concrete. And who was still here to reclaim its name. They arrived with clipboards and quiet voices. 3 of them. 2 women and a man. All in soft shoes and buttoned coats, and the kind of calm that comes from doing good work for a long time. David opened the door. Didn't say hello. Just nodded once. Tight. Shelby hovered near the stairs, arms crossed. I met them in the foyer. Welcome back, I said. This way. We walked the house not as owners and guests, but as stewards. As witnesses. They took photos. Measured door frames. Asked gentle questions. How many square feet is the main level? Are there original blueprints? Is the soil in the garden treated? David followed us like a man trailing his own verdict. At one point, he leaned in and said, "Do you even know what they'll do with it?" I looked at the group ending to check the baseboards, noting the slant in the sunroom floor, and replied, "I know they'll remember it matters." In the kitchen, the younger woman paused. She touched the window frame, ran her fingers along the wood. "This house. It has care in it. You can feel it." I nodded. "My husband sanded that by hand 40 years ago. He never liked the grain, but he said the imperfection made it honest." She smiled. Shelby watched from the hall, tight-lipped. When we moved outside, the man walked the length of the garden beds, bent to examine the soil. "This could feed families," he said. "Properly structured, you'd be amazed what a small plot can do." David crossed his arms. "And we just lose our home?" "No," I said. "You keep your space. No one's asking you to leave." They looked unconvinced. "But you're not the only ones this house answers to now." They didn't reply. And that was fine, because not every truth needs to be accepted to begin its work. We wrapped the walk through on the front porch. The woman shook my hand. Firm. Warm. "We'll send the next steps by Friday." "Thank you, Miss Foster. You've done something rare." I didn't respond. Just watched her leave. The door closed. The silence settled. And Shelby whispered like it was too loud for the walls to hear. "You've turned our home into a project." I looked at her. I've turned my silence into something that finally has a future." The new sign went up on a Monday morning. Not big. Not bold. Just a wooden post with soft lettering. "Future site of the Foster Community Learning Garden. **. They placed it near the front walk, where the lawn caught the first sun, where Harold used to plant daffodils every February. I stood on the porch, watched them hammer the post in with care, with gloves. Like it was sacred. David pulled into the driveway. Late. He had forgotten it was today. He got out of the car slowly, stared at the sign, then at me. "You really did it," he said. No anger, just awe, and something like loss. I nodded. "They named it after you?" "They asked," I said. I said yes. He stepped closer, looked down at the fresh dirt, the sealed post. "You never said you wanted something named after you." I didn't. I just wanted to stop being forgotten. He swallowed. Hard. Shelby watched from the window. Didn't come out. Not yet. Inside the house was quiet. But it didn't feel empty anymore. The director had sent over seed packets, children's books, a small bench carved from reclaimed oak, all of it waiting in the sunroom, all of it ready. David looked at the sign again. "So what now? We share the house with strangers." I shook my head. You share it with memory, with meaning, with something that will outlast both of us." He didn't answer. Just looked at his shoes. Then at me. "Mama, why didn't you just tell me how deep this ran?" I stared at him a moment. I did. Every day I stayed. Every time I was quiet when you called me extra. He winced. "I didn't mean it like that." "But you did." I turned away. Went back to my rocker. The one they once stored in the attic. It was back now. Right by the window. I sat. Listened to the birds. Let the breeze move the curtains. Then Clara's voice floated from inside. "Grandma, can I help plant the books?" I smiled. "They're not for planting, sweetheart. They're for growing something else." She curled up at my feet. watched the garden through the glass. And I thought, maybe the future doesn't arrive loud. Maybe it just shows up and waits for someone to notice it belongs. What would it take for someone to finally see the foundation they've been standing on all along? The mornings feel different now. Not lourde. Not busy. Just more awake. I still rise before the others. Still brew my tea the old way. Still sit by the window where the light finds the floor exactly like it did 40 years ago. But now there's movement outside. Children from the neighborhood walk past the new sign. Sometimes they wave. Sometimes they stop to read. Foster. They say it like it's a word meant for planting. The garden beds have been turned. Not perfectly. Not quickly. But with care. They dug up the dry weeds, left a corner for the daffodils. Asked if they could paint the old bench. I said yes. Let them make it theirs, without erasing what was mine. Inside the house, things are quieter too. Shelby doesn't slam cabinets anymore. She asks before moving things. David comes home earlier. Sometimes he sits beside me without checking his phone. He's the one who offered to oil the rocker. Didn't say much, just brought a rag and the can and worked in silence while Clara read aloud from the porch steps. She reads better now. Says she wants to be a teacher. I keep the application for the learning program folded in the top drawer. She doesn't know yet. But the day she's ready, it'll be there. One evening, David brought out the old photo of Harold and me on the porch. The one they'd tucked behind the linens. He had it reframed. Same picture. New glass. He didn't say sorry. But he didn't have to. He handed it to me and said, "This belongs on the wall again." And so it went back above the mantel where the light hits it just before dusk. Sometimes the neighborhood kids point to it when they visit the reading room. They ask, "Is that you?" And I say yes. That's the woman who believed a house could be more than a roof. They nod like they understand. Even if they don't yet. The land trust calls once a month. Gives me updates. Asks if I'd like to attend board meetings. I say no. I've said enough. Now it's their turn to carry it forward. I still cook Sunday supper. Still make too much cornbread. Still fold napkins into little triangles even when no one notices. But lately they notice. David thanks me. Shelby compliments the crust. Clara insists on setting the table like Grandma likes it. The shift didn't come loud. It came leaf by leaf. Word by word. One quiet morning at a time. Spring arrived gently this year. No harsh winds. No broken branches. Just soft sun through the curtains and the sound of children laughing in the yard that once only held silence. They planted carrots last week. Their hands clumsy, their joy exact. The director brought new benches. Wider ones with backs strong enough for grandparents to sit. One of them asked if I'd like a plaque on the wall inside. I said no. I don't need my name carved. I've already left it in every floorboard, every hinge, every story the walls still hold. Shelby volunteers now. She reads twice a month to the little ones. Voices each animal with more care than I ever expected. David fixed the attic fan last weekend. Said it felt good to keep something standing. Sometimes, he sits beside me on the porch with nothing to say. Just presence. Just air between us that no longer hurts to breathe. And Clara, she writes poems now. The other day, she slipped one under my teacup. Asterisk. My grandma is a seed. She went quiet so we could grow. Asterisk. I kept it. Tucked it inside Harold's Bible. Right between the page where we underlined, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Sometimes, peace doesn't come from holding on. Sometimes it's what rises after you let go on your own terms. This house still creaks. Still sighs. But now the sounds mean something. They echo with use. With stories, with people who walk softer because they know someone came before. I don't plan to move. But I don't fear leaving anymore. Because I've already left what needed to stay. Not loud. Not branded. Just rooted. Right where they'll never forget whose hands made room for them to grow. The late sunlight touches the wood grain of the old table, and for a moment, everything feels soft again. I've learned that legacy isn't loud. Sometimes it's just a name remembered in silence, and a pie shared with grace. What quiet legacy do you hope to leave behind? We'd love to read your story in the comments below. You are not alone. Your journey matters. Subscribe to Grandma Radio, where every story is a second chance.